Welcome to another episode of our new series, Breakdown to Breakthrough. I'm Jaynie Morris, CEO and founder of Transforming Now Together, and it's my absolute pleasure to either have your company back with us again on our podcast series, or if you are listening to this for the very first time or watching it on videocast, then welcome, and we're delighted to have your company. Each episode is part of a new series that we're doing at Transforming Now Together. Breakdown to Breakthrough is pretty much self-explanatory, and each of our guests that we have on our podcast series have a story to tell, have insight and inspiration for people that are going through whatever breakdown to get to their breakthrough, and it can be in absolutely any area of their life. Our whole goal is to bring people to you so that if it resonates and helps and empowers and inspires you, then we've done our job. So my guest today is a gentleman that I stalked on another podcast, and he was kind enough to accept my invitation to come onto our podcast. Dr. Nicholas Neaves lives in South Africa, so he's a little bit further away from most of my guests, given that we record here in Australia. He lives in a beautiful part of South Africa called Mossel Bay. I've not been there yet, but we're going to find out a little bit about that as well. He's an author, he's a life coach, he's a dad, and he has some amazing insight to share with us. His book, which is available on Amazon, Unbound, is also the name of his coaching business, Unbound Coaching. Dr. Nicholas Neaves, welcome to the Breakdown to Breakthrough.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So, Nicholas, before we get into your coaching and also what you actually focus on, can you give our audience a little bit of an insight to who Nicholas is?
Well, thanks for that introduction. Nicholas is, I think, a seeker, somebody who tries to live with an authentic heart as much as possible. One of the key words that I'm focusing on at the moment is one of my affirmations is alert more. And that means getting in touch with what it is that I'm actually feeling and just allowing myself to express and to share. So I'm in a very creative space at the moment. The coaching has been a wonderful experience for me with regards to helping people find that deeper connection within themselves and ultimately intimacy. And I think the intimacy part for myself is experienced through being a dad with my 3 girls. So that's a big focus at the moment. My wife passed on almost 7 years now when the girls were very small. So our journey has been one of, I'd say, courage from my side, their side too, and the lessons, the breakthroughs are there, and that's left me with deep gratitude, with this heart, as I say, that's ready to just alert.
Well, we're looking forward to you sharing more of that with us, not only on this podcast, but I get a feeling we're going to see a lot more of you through our businesses, our joint businesses as well. Nicholas, your passions, as you've just touched on there, but also through your coaching and what you want to change as far, will help contribute to change with other people's breakdowns. In particular, what struck me in the podcast that I heard you being interviewed on recently with Jenny Schmal, a friend of Transforming Now Together, is in particular understanding the feminine heart and also dating and relating. Both of those topics are intriguing. However, in particular, understanding the feminine heart, that's a big ask, isn't it?
You know, where we are here in Mossel Bay, we look over the ocean, and every day that ocean reminds me of the depths of the feminine heart, and it's unfathomable. I think there is such a beautiful metaphor in the ocean when it comes to a woman's heart, and I saw that in my wife also during her journey. She had breast cancer, just the amount of outpouring from her heart as far as love, grace, but also anger, fear, was the most humbling experience that I've ever had. And it was in those experiences with Alicia, my late wife, that I realized how deep the heart is. And there were many times that I felt helpless and useless, in fact, with her in her journey. That made me get onto this path with coaching. And the feminine heart for me is one that I feel a lot of women have forgotten about too. And the world at the moment is dictating so much that we enter our minds and think a lot more logically and get through our days with goals and structures in place. But yet, you know, as a man, I sit here also looking at women in their most wild and expressive ways as more attractive than somebody who would be a little bit more in their structured sort of mind. So the heart for me has been a fascination, and you know, the ocean metaphor is just that, is the depth that's available for us to enter into, and to, as men, be brave enough to go on a voyage on. And I often say to men, you have to be as firm and solid as a lighthouse on the edge of the ocean, so that when she crashes down on you, you don't crumble. You can still stand firm, and that lighthouse is still standing there erect and ready for more. And we don't just crumble at the first sign of a wave that heart is giving us. And I love that metaphor, and a lot of the coaching is based on that. It is to allow women, or remind women, that they are the tidal wave, they are the tsunami, but they can also be the still ocean, they can also be the clear ocean. And to allow all of that is the journey into the heart. And it's really about asking that question: if a man is not taking your heart deeper than what you take in your own heart at the moment, then what is he doing in your life? And I think that for me is the standard that we should look at. And women ask me often, how do I know if it's the right guy? And then I say to them, is this man taking your heart deeper than what you're taking your own heart? And a lot of women then get that, they understand what that means. And by taking her heart deeper, I don't mean necessarily just with romance, but I mean with his presence, with his leadership, with his love, his humor. These are roles that us men must remember are gifts in women's lives. A lot of the men that I coach often feel like they're, as I said earlier, feel a bit useless in the presence of women who are so empowered and so much in touch with their feelings. But us men can certainly support through that metaphor, that lighthouse, being grounded and solid in our love, that can penetrate through her heart and allow it to go deeper than what she can take it on her own. Then it's the right man for you.
Do you think, Nicholas, that the conditioning over generations that, you know, of a woman and a man in a relationship, or anybody in a relationship really, in particular, in the last couple of generations in particular worldwide, there's been this quite a strong push of more of the uprising of the independence of a woman, and bringing those up. Do you think that whilst that is ideal and perfect and should be, because everybody should be empowered in their own space and life, do you think that has hindered a man's belief in their role in a relationship, if that makes sense?
It certainly comes through in the coaching. You know, again, you know, these are general sort of observations, but certainly I see it in the clinical practice that I keep. And, you know, us men value a strong woman, but we also appreciate when she can still be vulnerable. And what that means is we value independence ourselves, and women who can be independent. And a lot of the guys these days are also, financially in a situation, particularly in midlife, where maybe they've had a divorce or other issues happening, and they find themselves not as empowered as before. So they're looking for a partner who's an equal or independent as such, particularly with finance too. They don't want to necessarily be a father or or the bank to somebody. So independence is a quality that men do look for, but again, it's that vulnerability. You see, when a man is given that opportunity to take her heart deeper. Now, a practical example could just be something like, hey, if she says to him, hey, honey, I've just come back from shopping. All the bags are there in the boot. Would you mind giving me a hand? Right? And he says, no problem. And he goes and he helps her, and he takes the stuff through into the kitchen. He helps unpack the groceries into the fridge. And she says, that really made a difference to me. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was wonderful. That's a beautiful little synergy. That's a beautiful dance that just happened, where she gave him a job, an opportunity to help her, where she had a need. She was perhaps, in that moment, feeling a little exhausted from the shopping experience, and she asked her partner to come and help, and he helped. And that's a beautiful sort of breakdown of the independence. Is yes, go out there and go get your groceries, go and shop and do what you got to do, but he can help you carry the weight of that into the house. And that's an example of the bigger spectrum around relationships in general, is when she can be a little vulnerable at times. His alarm bells go off, and then he feels he has a place and he can help her. And that, I think, is what's lacking a lot. There's a lot of women that I do coach, due to previous relationships or hurt or disappointment with men, have lost trust, have lost the sense of vulnerability, where they would normally reach out and ask somebody for help, having been let down. And now they're doing it all on their own. So I value independence, but I think when it is a compensation for previous trauma or pain or disappointment, I think a better word could be hardening, a layer around the heart because of the letdown, the hurt. And when that gets projected onto the next man, he has a very little chance of actually succeeding in that relationship. He's going to have to be a very strongly directed man to be able to break through that hard shell that she's created around her heart due to her disappointment. So be independent, but it's about allowing that heart to still be vulnerable and creating the trust, rebuilding the trust if you feel that you don't have that any longer, to allow a man into your life. There's a lot that men can do also, of course, but the feminine heart, because I see it in the practice, has been hurt and it's closed, and it's a question mark around how to get that open again.
Do you find that, especially like women over 50 who have been through, they might have been through one, they might have been through a couple of divorces or a couple of relationship breakdowns and what have you. Do you find that they're using that term that you just did then of hardening and increasing their mistrust? Do you find that there is a light at the end of the tunnel for those women in your practice, or do you find that there's a closure, that they're not even openly receptive to the counselling that you and the support that you give them?
Yeah. So again, we close our hearts in order to survive at the end of the day. We've all experienced hurt, and it's damn painful. And we don't suddenly go, well, I'm going to close my heart right now and become hard and therefore, attract weaker emotional men or just not have a relationship. That's my choice. It's not a choice. It's what happens. And when life happens, depending on your skill, depending on your support structures, depends a lot on how you get out of that. Meaning, do you stay hardened or do you process? And the key word here is the feelings. So when a woman comes into the practice, she's already in a space where she's willing to express a feeling, even if that feeling is, I'm angry at men, or I'm angry at my previous partner, or I'm disappointed, right? That's a key into her heart, because underneath the anger and the disappointment is the sadness, is the fear. And it's about going into those emotions, honoring those emotions, allowing those emotions to surface, because that unpacks the heart. And when you allow the heart to unpack, you know, the feminine heart is like a beaker. It wants to receive, but the minute it's full, one can't receive. So as the feelings get expressed, there is a reception that takes place. She's allowing herself to receive more, which means she'll then look at a man with a softer eye, and she will see that he has the potential to bring something into her life that she can receive from. And that's the key. And of course, there's hope. There's always hope. And I mean, I've worked with some, you know, quite severe cases of trauma and abuse and things in the practice, and you know, subjects around rape and molestation and things like that. And it is a journey. Of course, it's a journey. And I think what women also need to remember is a lot of that trauma and stress is actually stored in the body. And when we try and analytically work through those traumas, we often remain the victim to those experiences, because there's no way of analyzing such trauma. Your answer is always going to end up in negative emotion, in my experience. But the more you can get in touch with the trauma in the body, which means doing certain exercises, embodiment exercises, that can actually start to create cracks around that hardened heart, and with the right guidance and the right counseling, they can then start to access the pain, they can start to access the anger, they can start to access the fear that's trapped in the body, and that ultimately starts to get the heart opening again. And remember, the minute the heart starts to open, because the heart symbolizes love, that the minute they can start to get a sense of a hint of gratitude, a hint of appreciation for what's happened in their lives, the heart just gains more and more momentum, and that gratitude starts to be the healing balm that they've needed to be able to ultimately find a place in their hearts for those men or those experiences, versus constantly trying to deny them a place in their hearts, in their minds, by trying to mentally eradicate them. You know, there's quite a few studies around victim and perpetrators, and how victims bond with their perpetrators, because these experiences are very deep, and the trauma is very deep, that it forms a connection, an emotional connection, which can be very confusing to a person, because it's messy emotionally. Right? Why am I thinking of this person? Why am I connected with this person? All they did was cause me pain. And those connections are very interesting to explore in healing. And ultimately, when they can open their hearts to the experiences. Can I give you a very quick little story? I worked with this one lady. She loves it if I share her story. She was raped 5 years ago, and what happened there is she could not move on and have relationships going forward. So I worked with her, and I said to her, tell me everything that was really horrible about this experience. And she wrote down, with my guidance, about 100 things that were really terrible. And then I turned to her and I said, well, let's look at the things that you've really learned from this experience. What has been positive? And she wanted to slap me, understandably. She says, there's nothing good about this experience. And I said, no, well, let's try and find it. And little bit by little bit, she realized that, you know, she's got a book coming out on the subject. She helps women who's been through the same experience. She met the nurse on duty that night at the clinic after the experience, and they've been best friends ever since. And little bit by little bit, all of these wonderful things had happened to her since the rape experience. Then she turned to me and she said, but it was still agony. And then I said to her, I understand that, but can you tell me where the ecstasy was? Right? And the reasons why I was asking that is because the mind generally polarizes experiences into negative or positive. And it's the heart that finds the union of those two places where those breakthroughs happen. That's the breakthrough. The breakthrough is when we can use our minds to find what's negative and positive equally, so that the heart opens to allow the experience to happen. So she says to me, I remember seeing my father. I was held in his arms like an angel during the rape experience. I said, how was that? She said, no, that was like an angel was holding me. It was ecstasy. And I said, well, that's incredible. Tell me about your father. And she said, no, when I was born, he left. I never knew my father. But the night I was raped, my mother phoned him. He came back into my life. And for the last 5 years, he and I have had the best relationship ever. And I said to her, you came here today for me to have taken away this experience from you. But yet, if we do so, you may not know your father. You may not have written that book, given those classes, known that nurse. And then, she realized what I was saying. And I said to her, do you have chosen the experience or not? And she says, no, I choose the experience. It has a place in my heart now. Right? And she actually walked out of that session calling her the perpetrator, the rapist. She called him her liberator. Okay, so I mean that's quite a story taken out of context, but that's the power of the healing of the heart, and being able to go in and find with our wisdom the love that is waiting to be unleashed from that heart, and to have all our experiences placed in our hearts, so that they can be let go of. That's the key. Whatever you can love, you can let go of. If you're resenting it, it'll stick around. If you're hurt by it, it'll stick around. So the key there is to be able to find that love as best you can, and that's a lot of what the coaching is about, so that people can let go of things and then be that receptive beacon again, to allow things into her life again, where the trust will then come back to.
An incredibly powerful story, Nicholas. That and I think that's you've, by sharing that, and thank you very much for sharing that, and her giving you permission to do so. By sharing that, that's the core of our discussion today, because that breakdown could, and does, for any person that is raped in that horrific situation, can sometimes never come back from that darkness, and can sometimes be quite a tragic ending. And for you to be able to demonstrate and to take her, hold her hand and take her through that, I'm sure it certainly resonated with me, and I'm sure it's resonated with many of our listeners today. That was a very powerful story. Thank you for sharing that with us. Nicholas, I want to talk to you about your book, Unbound, that is available on Amazon. Can you give us a précis version, and what, for those of us who haven't read the book yet, what we could expect?
So the theme Unbound really came from that place of what we've just shared around the heart being bound, through our perceptions and our thoughts, and how that binds the heart from feeling love. And the journey into the book, again, was inspired with my journey around my late wife, and the personal journey I took to free my heart from that experience and make it unbound again and ready for love. And a lot of that journey had to do with the fact that 3 girls were there. And I think if it weren't for them, I'm not sure where I would be today. Because every day, those 3 little girls, they were 5, 3, and 1 when their mom died. And, with children, as we all know, they constantly bring you back into the moment. They're constantly bringing you back into the reality of what's in front of them. So if you if you're feeling sad or as a victim and your mind is going all over, and your kids are going to go, Dad, I'm hungry. Dad, we need this. Dad, we need that. And and for me, that was an experience of finding presence again with them, and that means being in that moment. So the book's inspired around that experience, and it's led into the coaching on how to help people really access their moments together better and be able to relate to each other in a very loving way that enhances intimacy. And that doesn't necessarily just mean sexual intimacy, it's emotional intimacy also. And the book is split up into the woman unbound and the man unbound, and then the couple that's unbound ultimately. And so it's about, like you were saying earlier, about being independent as a man and a woman and being differentiated in that. And I think that's one of the keys in relationships that people forget, is to stay differentiated. In relationships, people often become so entangled in each other that they forget who they are. And so they can't gift each other their strengths. So the book is a journey into our story, my personal story, with the intention of helping people how to understand healing around trauma, the loss, the grief, and how that is a process, and then ultimately helping them with more practical tips and ideas around intimacy, both from a man's and a woman's perspective. And of course, when I write about the woman's perspective, there was that disclaimer in the beginning that I'm not a woman. I purely speak from the place of, all the hours of counseling that I've done with ladies, coming from that place versus actually being a woman and speaking for them, which obviously I can't do. But I think the wonderful feedback that I've had has been because as a man, I'm able to give women very direct opinions on how their behavior could be potentially affecting men, and they appreciate that. It goes back to that theme I have of blurting and just being able to say it how it is and being blatantly honest and cutting through the little splurb at the back is, if you're sick and tired of relationship BS, then this is the book for you.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to reading it, Nicholas, and I know that our listeners certainly, now that you've shared that insight, are as well. And I would go as far as to say that as you've just said, all of the work that you've been doing, certainly with women, giving you that professional insight as well as that emotional insight as well, is serving and helping a lot of men throughout as well. Have you found with obviously the last couple of years has changed the world somewhat, have you found that your services, you're able to, I don't like that word pivot, but have you been taking more online as far as clients are concerned for your coaching, Nicholas?
Yeah, it's with the online availability, we've grown globally, which is wonderful, and we have a lot of clients that are both in America, Europe, also actually mostly in New Zealand. There's a lot of South Africans who've moved down to New Zealand. Some of my old patients, they still stay in touch, so it's a wonderful way of still connecting with them and seeing them. Yeah.
We've got a very big audience in New Zealand, and I can tell you that a huge percentage are from South Africa. So I know that, and I know one couple in particular who will be listening to this podcast that are originally from South Africa and then did move to Australia. That's where I met them, and they're very dear friends of mine. And I know they'll be listening and they'll say, "Yes, she's right," on that as well. Nicholas, before we let you go, a couple of things. First of all, so with everything, with where your world has gone since the passing of your beautiful wife and the journey that you've taken with your girls and your business as a whole, on a daily basis, what would you say inspires you?
The bravery of my clients. They come through that door with the most incredible experiences and stories that leave one humbled every day. And just when you think your story has weight, then you hear the next story. And you know, I mean, just recently I worked with another lady who had been married 3 times, and each one of those husbands had committed suicide.
Oh.
Right. And, you know, that, and over a 20-year period, obviously, but that's some story. That's some, you know, now how does she go forward with trust with, and, you know, and I think she's 52. How does she move forward? So yes, it's a humbling experience, and I think that's what's inspiring is the opportunity to go and fight for people's hearts so that they can find love again and live each day. I mean, you know, one of the experiences with Alicia on her last day, Alicia actually passed on Christmas Eve, and sorry, Christmas Day, and then on Christmas Eve, she was telling me that the one thing that she regretted the most was that her and I never danced more together.
Oh.
And you know, when someone that you love says that to you, it certainly inspires you to do the dance of life every day, because nothing's guaranteed. So what inspires me are those words. They've stuck with me. They've been tattooed on my heart, so to speak. So I'll make sure that every day I do my best to dance wherever I can and with whomever I can.
Sorry.
You know,
I felt the two of you right there, and I'm sure that our listeners did as well. Thank you for sharing that very intimate moment as well.
Yeah.
Now, Nicholas, my Jaynie question that I always ask my guests at the end of our interviews is that if you had an 8-year-old Nicholas sitting in front of you right now, what advice would you give him?
I'd say to him, go and follow the impulse that is at your feet. So that means look down at your feet, feel your toes, feel them wriggling, and let them take you wherever they want you to go. And trust that. Meaning that, you know, it's actually an exercise that I do is some mornings I'll look at my toes and I'll wriggle them and I'll ask them, where do you want to go today? So I tell him that, because I mean, that's the mischief, that's the adventure, that's the pirate inside every man's heart that is yearning to get out there and go and cause trouble, right? In a good sense, like go and intentionally stuff things up and go and have a good time. Don't be so, you know, don't try and be so perfect and precious and doing the right things. And it's actually one of the things that I tell my guys to do in coaching is your next date that you go on, intentionally try and stuff the date up. Like go there and try and be a hooligan, right? It's such counterintuitive advice, because what you're saying to the guy is, don't go there and try and show off all your medals and your shiny bits and things like that. Is go take her on an adventure, right? Go be a pirate with her, man. Take her to your ship, and, you know, like metaphorically, right? Take her to your ship. At least you've got a ship. You know, go take her to your ship and take her on a voyage, right? So don't sit there at the restaurant eating your dinner, right? You know, have something to eat, but then take her hand and go and get an ice cream with her. Once you've done the ice cream, take her down to the beach and go and look at the rock pools together, right? And then push her into the sea and have a swim together and take your clothes off and look at the moonlight. And, you know, that's a date, right?
That's a date.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that is fabulous. And that, Nicholas, is every woman's dream. So for every man that that comes to see you, Nicholas, make sure you tell them to do that, because that is go and muck it up, because that's what we girls want. Absolutely. That is absolute gold. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Nicholas, if any of our listeners, and I'm sure they will, would like to contact you, where would be the best, how could they best contact you to explore more for you?
Yeah, thank you. I think, you know, we're very active on the Unbound Coaching Facebook social media platform. I think that's a good starting point. We've got 2 lovely groups going there, one for women Unbound and one for men Unbound. People are very invited to join those groups if they wish. I think that's a good starting point. Just come check us out there on the Facebook page, because there's a lot of information, as well as the personality around the coaching, and that's a nice place to, in your own time, just go have a look at before perhaps reaching out and making contact.
Fantastic. And of course, your book Unbound is available
Yes.
now at Amazon, so they can get that from there as well. Nicholas, it's been an absolute delight. I'm so honored. Thank you so much for being on our Breakdown to Breakthrough podcast. I really appreciate your time. And I know on behalf of all of our listeners, lots of gold gems in our conversation today. And I'd love to invite you again at some point in the future. I'd love to. I think we've got some more.
Yes, I felt that too. Thank you for that.
No, it's been our pleasure. Thank you so much. And for all of our listeners, thank you again for joining us on the second episode of Breakdown to Breakthrough. Wherever you're listening to us, remember that we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple. We're global, so we're everywhere. And of course, if you'd like to catch up on any of the other episodes, or if you want to make sure that you never miss out on any podcast episode, just go to www.jayniemorris.com, go to the podcast section, click the subscribe button there, and every episode that we produce, you always get it first. So it's been my pleasure having your company today. And wherever you are in this amazing, beautiful world of ours, I hope you have an absolute fabulous day. And oh, by the way, wherever you're listening to this or watching it, down below, you will see all of the details of how to contact Dr. Nicholas Neaves as well. We've got it all there for you in case you missed anything that we've been saying. So remember to like, comment, and share. Spread the love. That's what we're all about. That's what Breakdown to Breakthrough is here for. So as I say, wherever you are in this absolutely amazing, beautiful world of ours, I'm Jaynie Morris. I look forward to having your company next time on Breakdown to Breakthrough.